typically we would have a program for you so you could read along with me, but I want you to understand we are just thrilled to have Scott Carter with us today. He has more than 25 years extensive experience in strategy, supply chain innovation, and management. He currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer for National DCP, the $2 billion supply chain management company serving the franchises of Dunkin' Donuts. In this role, he leads the company's overall business strategies focused on transformation, effective processes, and sustainable growth. Scott has played a major role in helping NDCP evolve from 5 separate operating companies into a nationally unified cooperative. He began working with the company in 2009 as a consultant, board member, and interim CEO in order to transform the capability and performance of NDCP. He took the role of Chief Executive Officer again in 2013 and is a member of the board of directors. Under his leadership, NDCP has generated over $649 million in savings for its members, made significant improvements in service performance, and launched an unprecedented business and IT transformation, all of which were recognized with Partnership Gwinnett's 2015 Supply Chain Pioneer Award and the 2016 Information Week Elite 100 Award. Scott also personally was honored by being named to the 2017 Food Logistics Champions Rock Stars of the Supply Chain list. I like that. He's a rock star. Prior to joining NDCP, Carter served as the chairman and chief executive officer of Supply Chain Associates, a leading management consulting firm that provides global business strategy for top performing companies whose supply chains are critical components of their operations. He served as a strategic advisor to numerous Fortune 500 companies throughout his career and held executive roles with CHEP, a Brambles company, Coca-Cola, Ernst & Young, McDonald's, and UPS. Community involvement is a top priority for Scott. He serves as a guest lecturer at Georgia Tech in addition to his role with us today. He's helped employees raise nearly $20,000 during one of the largest Relay for Life events in the U.S. He's supported numerous golf tournaments and special events that help raise funds for Dunkin' Brand's Joy in Childhood Foundations. He's a member of the Gwinnett County Chamber of Commerce and the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and we are proud to say that he is a graduate of the University of West Georgia. So let's all give a virtual welcome to Mr. Scott Carter. I'm going to turn it over to you, Scott. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. McIntyre. Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Thank you again for the feedback. Thank you for that introduction. That's fantastic. I often don't sit back and think about what I've done in my career and where I'm at today. And, you know, I look back, and many of the decisions that I made while in school at the University of West Georgia really brought me to where I am today. From family, work, you name it. I met my wife there 29 years ago. You know, we've been married for 25 years. Those were decisions I made at that campus, and it was fantastic. That's also how I made the decision to enter the operations arena, if you will, in finance. I entered my career really with Ernst & Young, focused on mergers, acquisitions, and restructurings. And sort of the financial wizards on the financial side of the house would come up with these calculations and valuations for company value and what could be attained in a future valuation. And then they'd throw it over the wall to guys like me who actually had to go deliver it. We had to go operationalize it. And we did that around the globe. I did it for some 25 plus years, as Dr. McIntyre mentioned. Now today I'm going to present to you, who we are as NDCP and what we do for the organization that is Dunkin' Donuts. What a great brand to support. It's a fantastic franchise community. They're 100% franchised owned. Dunkin' Donuts as a brand is essentially an intellectual property holder. All the assets are held by the franchisees in terms of restaurants and store operations, as well as our organization, NDCP. We're a member-owned cooperative, so shareholders of our organization are the Dunkin' Donuts franchisees. It's a unique model. Essentially operating on a cooperative basis is a tax status. It basically says any income that I pass to my franchisees in form of a dividend is not taxable at the corporate level. So it's a legal structure as well as a tax structure. Now I'll jump into the impact on global supply chains from our pandemic that we've all experienced beginning early in 2020. Let me bring up this presentation. If I can get thumbs up, we can see it. Great. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a video on the background of our company to help set the stage.
US, we strategically source, purchase, and deliver the goods to National DCP is a $2 billion supply chain management co-op serving Dunkin' franchisees. As the 13th largest food service distributor in the U.S., we strategically source, purchase, and deliver the goods to more than 10,000 U.S. restaurants and customers in over 40 countries.
Our unique farm-to-fork model provides our members, the franchisees we serve, with the absolute best service at the lowest possible sustainable cost, all to help them operate and grow profitable businesses.
Since our inception in 2012, NDCP's world-class strategic sourcing team has leveraged commodities management, supplier partnerships, and buying strategies to generate incredible value and assured supply for members. We have aggressively reduced the cost of goods in stores, hitting historic lows.
One of the greatest accomplishments of the National DCP has been the implementation of flat pricing. That means that no matter where the stores open across the United States, franchisees pay the same amount for their goods and services. And this has been an incredible enabler for us, the brand, to expand west and to all parts of the United States.
The NDCP has impacted my business in the Chicagoland area by increasing profitability. By making the products cheaper to the back of the house, the food and the paper, we're more profitable. In California, I can honestly say that if it wasn't for NDCP's flat pricing, we would have considered expanding there.
Drivers for NDCP pay close attention to details, consistency, and customer service as they work to deliver all of the products necessary to run a Dunkin' restaurant on time and in full. NDCP collaborates closely with Dunkin' on supply chain management, rolling out limited time offers, handling distribution challenges, and more. More than 100 million pounds of coffee, 24 million gallons of milk, and other products cycle through NDCP's 9 distribution centers and 34 logistics hubs each year. National DCP is a great place to work. Our corporate values include respect, integrity, ownership, dedication, collaboration, and proactivity. We offer competitive compensation packages and strong benefits. We care about the communities NDCP serves. Our outreach program has helped raise over $6.1 million for Dunkin's Joy in Childhood Foundation and more than $14 million to fund cancer research with Dana-Farber. Our community outreach efforts focus on the key pillars of hunger relief, health and wellness, and sustainability.
When National DCP was formed, the expectations of savings over $200 million in 5 years, we more than doubled that. Now National DCP is exploring new ways to add more value to members moving forward.
NDCP is a valuable strategic asset for our members, and we couldn't do it without our terrific team members nationwide.
After all, if America runs on Dunkin', then Dunkin' definitely runs on NDCP.
So I hope that was helpful and gave you some more background, colorful background on who we are as a company. It's really a unique operating model in terms of legal structure and ownership structure, but it really drives a focused approach and solution for our customer and our members. Now let's talk about COVID-19. I know how we've all experienced it as consumers, but I'm going to take you behind the scenes in some of the conversations that, and activities that have unfolded for us as a company and for Dunkin' as a brand since, early 2020. So in March of 2020, we started seeing Europe shut down in February, and then in early March, and we began watching that and trying to understand what was going to happen in the United States. And so you got to think about it in terms of what kind of decisions we had to make and when we had to make them in order to prepare for what we expected was going to be some level of lockdowns. And indeed, within, call it 3 weeks of that decision making, 90% of the country was under some type of stay-at-home order. And you can imagine, you've seen the impact on casual dining and restaurants. You can imagine the same impact on QSR. So we were preparing, working with all of our partners. You look at what happened to our business in that period of time. Overnight, our business dropped by 50%. So I'm purpose built. I run with very narrow margins. I don't have a lot of excess capacity and flexibility, if you will, in the supply chain. And quite frankly, ever since Ford built the just-in-time supply chain and modeled it for the durable goods industry, we in the food industry took the same path and followed that just-in-time inventory methodology. So to give you some context here, in our Dunkin' system of, call it 10,000 restaurants in North America, our 9 distribution centers, we sit on an average of about 10 days worth of inventory physically in our buildings. So it's 10 days of sales for the franchisees. So when you start to think about a just-in-time food supply chain, you have to recognize that it's just in time all the way back to the farm. So 10 days of food supply in a restaurant supply chain is not unique. That is sort of the average in the US in terms of restaurants as well as CPG or grocery. We started to get in these debates about the lockdowns, and you started to see companies like Smithfield Foods or IBP or others talking about the plants that are processing proteins. That's not something we can turn off. If we turn off, we have no food supply in the country. And so they were having this debate in the media. It was an unfortunate debate, and it wasn't about profits for these companies. It was about not turning off the supply chains. When we turn off these supply chains, we wreak havoc globally across a farm to fork supply chain. So you can imagine I'm sitting here in a boardroom telling a team that has spent the better part of a decade doing their very best to source the lowest possible sustainable cost of goods, but deliver the absolute perfect service. And we're telling them overnight, take the $300 million in inventory that you have inbound in your supply chain, all the way back to the farm through manufacturing and through our DCs, and turn it off. Tell everybody to just stop. That wasn't in their DNA. Their DNA was to always execute, show up on time, show up in full, show up dressed to play for our customer. And we were telling them to stop because we needed to conserve cash and sort of take a wait and see approach to what was going to happen with the lockdowns. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the collaboration that we had with all of our partners, Dunkin', our board, and key partners, including suppliers, our legal partners, banking partners, quite frankly, even government relations, in our response to how we were going to essentially keep Dunkin' running, and quite frankly, provide a food source for a large part of the American population that we often don't think about. We think about a Dunkin' or a QSR as an optional sort of treat or optional food source, but it's really not. It's a primary food source for a large part of the population, the QSR industry as a whole. So it was important that we keep going and keep manufacturing and keep producing and keep delivering for those stores. Obviously, our approach was just like any other company's. We did not know what was going to happen with these lockdowns. So our immediate focus was cash preservation. We wanted to be able to protect the interest of our members, our employees. We wanted to keep payroll flowing to our employees who are now found themselves at home. We worked with our banking partners to set up new lines of credit, new access to cash. At that point, it was about cash preservation because it was a big unknown. And these, again, are decisions we're making in hours and days, not weeks and months. We didn't have the leisure or the time to do that. Hours and days making these decisions. We worked with our suppliers to help them manage all the way back to the farm, right? They have contracts in place for commodities they have to execute against. Food is a perishable good. If you stop the supply chain, you end up with an incredible amount of waste being thrown away as a result of the perishability of the products. And indeed, you heard that. You heard about farmers throwing away and dumping milk, dumping dairy, dumping eggs. The supply chains that we operate from a QSR and restaurant standpoint versus a supply chain that you may buy from in terms of a grocery channel are two very different supply chains. So a company like a ConAgra or a Cargill, they may supply both channels, but they do it from two very different supply chains and very different manufacturing capabilities. And probably the best example of this, and sort of, I like to, maybe a lighthearted example of it, is the toilet paper shortage. Most people don't think about really, a paper goods shortage and what drove that toilet paper shortage. It truly was a shortage, not of raw material and not of the actual product itself. It was a shortage based on the demand types. So as consumers at home, we like, a premium toilet paper, something that we find comfortable. In the commercial space, in the industrial space, I think hospitality, leisure, restaurant, office, they're not focused on a premium product. They're focused on a basic product to serve the needs of the visitors to their various real estate assets. Those two types of toilet paper are manufactured very differently and in very different plants by the paper and pulp industry. They can't just convert what is now stay-at-home volume because nobody's in restaurants, nobody's in offices. So the demand doubled essentially on the premium product and collapsed on, let's just call it the everyday product for the office space. And having knowledge of that space, it is incredibly capital intensive. It takes millions and millions of dollars to get new capacity up and running. And so if you're Midwest Vaco or West Rock and you're looking to add that capacity, you're questioning what just took place. The demand that you're experiencing is not real. It was manufactured by lockdowns. So our supply and demand signals are now out of sync. So if you're a board or an investor and you've got to make a capital investment decision, that'll probably take you more than a year to get off the ground and get up and running and actually reach the capacities you want. You want to pause and think about that greatly, because if we get back to normal demands, that investment is essentially gone. There's no return on that investment. So it was a catch up. It was, folks had to catch up in the industry, but they had no excess capacity. In the, call it the consumer goods supply chain, especially food and disposables, we run in near real time with no excess capacity because they're looking to get, the greatest return on the assets that they can get. For us, we were really concerned about what we saw taking place across many industry sectors. We were watching people, close restaurants, terminate employees, end payroll programs. So we took a little bit different approach and furlough. I use that term loosely here because what we did is, we had to furlough 1,100 employees with a 50% volume drop. We just physically didn't have the work for them to do. But we were convinced in our own thinking and our own modeling, having watched Europe and Asia, that this was short-lived. This was maybe 3 to 7 weeks. People would start to open up, volumes and behavior would start to shape within that time period. And we indeed need these people back. So we kept them as whole as we could against payroll dollars so that we retained them. We didn't want to release them. We matched that with funding and aid that was coming from the federal government so that essentially those 1,100 furloughed employees were given a whole wage during that entire time. And we decided as an employer to take on their benefits. So we funded their medical benefits during that time period as well. The portion that they would have normally funded themselves, we took that on to maintain and keep them whole. And it was the best decision. We brought virtually every one of those employees back. We brought them back and kept them whole in their wages while they were gone, brought them back at full wage, and brought them back with full benefits. During that time, it became a communication challenge, right? Now we've changed all of our protocols from an operating standpoint, our 9 distribution centers. How are we communicating with our employees on a regular basis? We have a great communications team here. They worked tirelessly and quite frankly, endlessly, day in and day out, 24/7 on communicating with our customer, communicating with our employees, our constituents in government and other sectors. It was a challenging time to say the least. And we all learned how to video conference in a very fast way. And I laugh about it because we used WebEx sort of as a video conferencing tool for quite a while. So we had some comfort level with it. But then all these new technologies come rushing in as a result of the impact of the pandemic. And all of a sudden we realized that WebEx as a technology versus Zoom versus Teams, there were better technologies. So it was an experience for our employees to grasp communication. And now I would say virtually 90% of my communication is via video now. And I don't see it going back to what I'll call line telephoned conversations or conference calls. It'll be video primarily. Sort of moving through time as a result, we've got our capital lined up, we've got our banking partners lined up, we've managed the supply impacts working with our suppliers, and we start to see the volumes come back. We actually exceeded our 2020 budget targets as a result of all the activity that we took on throughout the year. We were able to not only stay financially healthy, keep 100% of our employees employed, we beat our budgets. Now, there was a lot of cost cutting, a lot of modifications taking place in our operations. I think I mentioned in here somewhere concepts around dynamic routing. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen, or what we're now thinking in terms of our decision making, and it's going to be one of the questions that I'm going to pose to you guys. We are in the food supply chain. We are in this, the sustenance business. People have to eat. It's not an optional, let's lock down and not produce. As a result, we saw consumer behavior rapidly change. I mean, global shifts in consumer consumption, from away from home to at home, from casual dining to QSR, which would be a Dunkin'. We've seen these volume shifts that brands have sought in many competitive ways for years. It's been an interesting dynamic, to say the least, in the marketplace. And we're all competing for the same resources, the same scarcity of resources. And you're starting to see that now creep into pricing. We're starting to see commodity prices increase. You're starting to see increasing pricing in a broad range of consumer products. We have a theory that we're talking about as a board and a leadership team. We sort of liken this to the 70s inflationary period of time when we had poor supply and demand signals around oil production. And as a result, that was creating what I'll call blind demand for products because of fear of not being able to have petroleum. This was a similar situation. Take away the oil, take away that concept, but this is a false demand signal. We shut demand down by instituting lockdowns. Demand was still there. People still ate the same amount of food and consumed the same amount of consumer goods, but employers had to shut down. And in a just-in-time supply chain, there's no inventories to support that. think back to what I said earlier, we carry 10 days of inventory. Our suppliers don't carry much more than that. We contractually require them to carry 14 days on their floor. But so less than a month, the nation can be out of food. That supply chain has to continue. Now, take all the demand we had for 2020 that was there and underlying the shutdowns, right? Sort of now we're blind to the demand. That starts to unlock when we lift the stay-at-home orders and we start to learn how to manage within the pandemic. So the real demand that was there comes out in force at the end of 2020. You add on top of it new demand for 2021 and pent-up demand that's built on top of it. And again, we have a capacity strain in our global supply chains. We can't catch up to those volumes, which is why you're still experiencing long lead times in terms of goods from Asia or Europe, long lead times in certain petroleum products. I'm sorry about that. You've seen global protectionism rising in the country or in the globe. A great example of that is in Europe when the European Union started really bickering over who was going to export what ingredients for AstraZeneca, and they started protecting their ingredients because they couldn't come to an agreement on how they were going to distribute and what countries were going to get AstraZeneca's vaccines first. So when we fall into a crisis, we often fall into some deeply worn grooves that we revert to. And that's protectionism. And this is an example of it. And a lot of that is what we're experiencing in the global supply chains today. A lot of it's driven by just the raw demand, the pent-up demand that we're trying to overcome. Throw onto that, a Suez Canal blockage with containers already in short supply around the globe. And really, it's neat to sort of show this as a media headline. I've got a canal blockage and it's going to slow down global trade. But the real issue is this pent-up demand, driving the demand for those shipping containers right there. Those 20-foot unit shipping containers are in high demand, and there's not enough of them in the globe to meet all that pent-up demand from the end of 2020 to 2021. We've built bigger ships to be more efficient. The shipping lines wanted to be a lot more efficient, carry more cargo. We've created these Supermax ships that now take 3 and 4 times longer to unload at the ports. So that's complicating, again, the demand and supply signals. We actually didn't need, from an efficiency standpoint, it made all the sense in the world, but it's actually slowing down our global supply chains because of the congestion at the ports now. I'm sure you've seen stories recently. There's 18 to 24 ships on any given day sitting at the port of Long Beach in California. That never used to happen. They moved in and out pretty seamlessly. They were unloaded quickly and moved on to next ports. And now they're waiting there 3 to 6 weeks on average before they can get unloaded. So let's talk about what's ahead. I mentioned earlier that we're concerned about inflation, what that means. Is it going to be as severe as what we experienced in the 70s with the oil crisis? Maybe, maybe not. I'm convinced that it is driven by false demand and supply signals, which is problematic because we have to catch up from those false signals. And again, when I say false, I mean sort of created, not really based on real supply and demand. We're looking at commodity component increases in our cost of goods that are 40 and 50% going into 2022. We hedge, so in 2021, we're well covered. But in 2022, when we would have executed those hedges last year for this year, there's no way we would have executed for 2022. We can't forecast that kind of accuracy into the future. Plus, there's no market for it, so we'd have paid a premium for it anyway. 2022 is going to be an interesting price year. When you have grain prices go up 50%, you see what's happening with lumber and building trades. You've got lumber at all-time highs. It's concerning for us. And at some point, my members, right, the Dunkin' franchisees have to pass that through in terms of pricing. So we all pay for it as a consumer. they fight it as long as they can, but eventually this is how our economy works, right? It's cyclical and it's a cycle. It's a money flow cycle. It will catch up. Now, I'm hoping it's temporary. I'm hoping that we fall back to some normal levels by the end of 2022, but we are going to see some price pressure up until that point. So if we're ready, I think I'm maybe 2 minutes over. Apologize. So here we are planning. We're looking at, we are a critical infrastructure supply chain, and I'm talking generically in terms of the food supply chain. We just had a 1 in 100 year event, and we realized we have some real continuity of supply issues when those events occur. How should we be thinking about that and planning for that in the future, knowing that this is recent memory, recent experience, but it's also once in 100 years? Do I extend capital? Do I invest? Do I limit just-in-time approaches to the food supply chain, build more inventories? We're thinking through those decisions right now as a result of where we are. And I'll leave you with this before we go to that question there. The final question is thinking about it differently. Dunkin' Donuts, and I can say this now because they're privately held with the Inspire transaction, no longer publicly traded. Their volumes over 2019 have done something we never expected. They're up 18% over, and I take out the pandemic year, right? Because they had the same bad quarter everybody else had. So we look back really at 2019, and they're up 18%. So we shifted consumer behavior in a very big way. Is that permanent? Are we going to have another 1 in 100 year event, or is that going to become more frequent? And so as a board and as a company, we're trying to understand, what's the future supply chain look like for us to avoid, quite frankly, which was a very, very painful year to experience.
Wow. I will say, Scott, you gave one of the best examples of why we had the toilet paper shortage that I have heard all year long. So thank you for that. Okay, so for all of our participants today, we are going to break you out into your rooms. We'll give you about 15 minutes. Wonderful. I have 3 thank yous. First and foremost to you for being with us. It is always terrific when we have good speakers, but it's especially nice when it's one of our alumni who comes back and speaks. We do have an award for you. It's clear, so I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on the screen.
Yeah. No, I see it. It's great. Thank you.
We would normally give this to you in person, but we will ship this to you so you can have it and proudly display it. And once the pandemic is over, you are welcome. Please come back and visit us. We'd love to show you everything that we've got on campus that's new. And of course, this fall will be in our new home for the Richards College of Business. So please do come back and welcome and visit us soon.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, allowing me to participate. I love talking shop. I love talking about what I do. I encourage any of you that want to continue a dialogue or want to reach out. Ashley knows how to find me. She's one of the few that is successful at finding me. So she knows how to reach me. If you guys have questions or want to talk or just want to engage, happy to do it. We're a great Metro Atlanta employer. We're always looking for top talent. And I love to talk shop. So happy to share when I can with you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. The second thank you goes to Mary Covington. She is on our session today, but I don't think she's able to speak. But please understand that this whole event, the McCalman Executive Roundtable, is funded by Mary Covington and the McCalman Foundation. So when you see her around town or when you're interacting with her, please pat her on the back and thank her for her support. She's been a loyal supporter and friend of the university for many, many years. And then finally, thank you to all of our participants today. This was the middle of the day. I know the Zoom setting is unique for what we're doing today. We all have a little bit of Zoom fatigue, but it was terrific. I don't know about your breakout teams, but our breakout room had a great conversation, and I hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you very much. Enjoy the sunshine, And we'll see you soon, face to face, we hope. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Take care.